Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda Carney. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And this week I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk with a lady that I've known about on social media but have only just met today, and that's Hogan. She's the director of Wildwood Coaching, and we're going to talk about the topic of outplacement and how to manage that and redundancy, which is where it often sits. And I'm interested in this topic because it's something that I see happen, and I can see that you can do it well and you can do it really, really badly. So really intrigued to understand, almost a bit of a masterclass we're going to look at here, aren't we, in terms of this topic?
Great,
so
yeah, thanks, Lucinda.
Thanks for joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, so I'm Hogan. I became the director of Wildwood Coaching, I think it's almost 4 years ago now. And that was as a result of stepping off the career ladder back in 2015, when I went to live overseas for 3 years. And I couldn't work whilst I was there, so I decided to train as a coach. And I came back, I had nothing to lose. I didn't have a job, so I thought, give self-employment a go. And I decided to bring together my 20 years experience in HR, having managed redundancy programs, my own personal experience of having 2 redundancies, been made redundant a couple of times, and also the fact that I'd recently qualified as a coach, and bring all of that together and decided to specialise in outplacement support. So here I am.
And I can see that as really important sort of specialism to have, to be able to bring those that expertise into organisations, because as I said earlier, it can be done really well or it can be done really badly. I mean, I take it you do it independently. I'm just thinking, when I worked for big organisations myself in the past, they might have gone to specialist companies to do that. Would you support those, or you're a nice alternative? Do you target certain size businesses?
I mean, I've worked with all size businesses, from sort of micro businesses up to large corporates, and I think it just depends on the need. And some people, will have relationships with some of the big companies, and others want more of a kind of tailored and sort of individual approach, and someone who's maybe a bit more nimble and a bit more responsive. And one of the things that I love, and I have a team of associates who work with me, is that we're all about the individual. And who is this individual in this situation? Because people come to us in similar situations. They have lost their job, and it would be really easy to kind of put them through some kind of process, or take them through the sort of sausage machine, as it were. But it's really important to say, okay, but who are you in this situation that is similar? And I think that's something that we do really well, and some organisations want that more sort of personal approach, maybe.
I mean, I can personally see, I'm not going to name, I'm thinking of one of the companies that we used to work with, or the business used to work with, and I used to think that it was very generic. I thought your term sausage machine was quite accurate there. And so it was almost something that the business was paying for to tick a box, but perhaps wasn't done to the same, personal level, which is what people really need if they're feeling vulnerable, or at such a time of change, really, if people are being made redundant. And I guess I've dived right in there. Do you want to explain, give us the basics? How would you define what outplacement is, when people might want to do it, and engage people like yourselves?
Yeah, so outplacement support, it isn't something that legally anyone has any obligation to do. So with a redundancy exercise, you just need to satisfy that you have you've complied with the law, as it were. But outplacement support is often used by those employers who are values led and want to demonstrate that from the beginning to the end of the employment relationship. So outplacement support is an opportunity for individuals to have access to specialists, to those professionals who will help them understand where their skills and strengths lie, what they want to do with that in the future. So some people want to change, other people want to continue with what they're doing, to make sure that they've got the tools and techniques to go out into the marketplace and to go out into the world of work, some of whom will never have had to do that in their career. And really importantly, to build confidence, because the redundancy, I've seen it from both sides of the table, confidence is one of the things that often gets knocked. And albeit it's not an individual that's made redundant, it's their role. It always is their role. But because we have such a close relationship with our jobs, it often always does feel personal. Yeah. So we're that opportunity to engage the specialists. And in my HR career, when outplacement support wasn't available, I would be the person having the consultation meetings and then being asked to look at CVs or help with interview prep and that kind of thing. And it's often very conflicting when you're in that situation.
Yes.
And I wasn't a specialist. Yeah, you're doing both sides.
Yeah.
And so not only does it free up support for the HR team to focus on, one side of the process, it also allows individuals to have that connection with someone who's completely independent, who has no agenda, who, there's no judgment. All there is this need to support and to help them move forward and sort of look at those next steps.
I can see how coaching is very useful in that position as well. I mean, we asked off camera. I said, it's an interesting one, the outplacement and redundancy, where at the moment everybody's talking about this challenge about talent retention and recruiting people, who's actually getting rid of them. But then we went on to the fact that actually being a values-led organisation is the sort of thing that might attract talent. Being an organisation that treats people well at all aspects of the life cycle and invests in people when they don't have to, by making sure they go on to the next role, that's a company that you therefore go, do you know what, I recommend them. If someone comes to you, it's actually quite an important and maybe not an previously unconsidered element of having a good employer brand, I reckon.
Yeah.
Case, isn't it? At the moment, I mean, I imagine though also it doesn't mean that people aren't making people redundant, does it? Just because we're trying to find the right people, there's still people right sizing. I mean, are you noticing any difference in terms of the demand for it at the moment?
Not especially. I think sort of my experience, I still think of myself as relatively young as a self-employed sort of person, as it were, is that there are peaks and troughs, and it's the kind of the famine and the feast piece, which I think many of us who are self-employed might experience. I've not noticed anything particularly different in terms of the profile necessarily of clients. So I have a couple of new clients this week, for example. I had some that came to me who were just sort of contemplating redundancies and wanted some information. So there's a steady sort of stream as far as I'm seeing. And I think, some of the numbers might be smaller, so that there isn't sort of the large scale size, certainly from my perspective, but there is always that need where people are maybe tweaking at the edges of organizations, and as you say, looking to right size and looking to sort of restructure in different ways, which might also be alongside a recruitment campaign, because it might be that you're just looking for skills in different places.
Yeah, and that might be really hard to manage, because I was just thinking, if it's a small scale redundancy, then people might feel it feels even more personal. And if you're recruiting at the same time, it's like, what did I do wrong, or what wasn't about me? So what do you notice about how people are impacted by redundancy? What's your sort of insight into how we can support people, or what organizations might need to do?
Yeah. So it varies. Some people will be almost seeing it as an opportunity. So, and some people may have had an escape plan that they wanted to kind of hatch long before this comes. And it might be just, this is the best thing that could have happened because I wanted to leave anyway, and I've got something lined up and great. But I see lots of people who are impacted by the process in many ways. And, we all in the HR profession want to do our best. We want to, take care of people, particularly in when they're vulnerable, as you said before, in a redundancy situation. But for various different reasons, some people will come out of that process and feel that they weren't valued, that they didn't have, that they weren't respected, and that it wasn't handled well. And so often I'll be spending some time with them, kind of piecing some of that back together and talking about the future as opposed to what went on before. And some people just want to talk. I mean, I've had clients who just want to just listen, and they would say to me, thank you for listening to me. That's really helping me with moving on, with all the emotion that's attached to redundancy, because, it is extremes of emotion. As I say, some people can be elated, oh great, I'll get my redundancy money and move on. Others are just absolutely devastated and don't even know what to do next.
And this is basically reaction to change, isn't it? I was thinking quite often I do training on change, and of course, people will go through these sort of emotions of change. One is where they might be feeling quite resistant and a bit angry and want to sort of spout, or they won't want to just talk through their opportunities, but they want to be heard. I guess actually those people who are conducting the redundancy, and you've obviously been in HR in a role of that, but whether you're a manager or the HR in it, people don't always know what they might feel bad, so you don't always respond, or may not legally be able to behave in a certain way, may not be able to respond with the full level of empathy that people need. So it must be good to have that objectivity.
Yeah, and I think, and having been in those consultation meetings, as you say, that we've got kind of a script, we've got a process. We don't want to deviate too much from that, and I completely get that. And I think a lot of it is the way in which the message is delivered, and that, as you say, it's about the empathy and the connection. And in that, for that moment in time when you're in those consultation meetings, that individual needs to know that they are the most important person for the next 20 minutes, whatever it might be, and that communication doesn't have to just be in that meeting. It can be outside of the meeting. Come to me with questions. I'm here to support you. What can I do to help? That kind of thing. And just making them feel that they are an individual and not just another kind of number or a name on a spreadsheet.
It's cleaner, isn't it? I think because it's that objectivity. It's like sometimes organisations just like having someone neutral. It's cleaner if you're able to do that. In terms of it, in terms of that, of course, so our audience are often internal. Often internal people within HR. It could be line managers as well. Is there anything that you would sort of recommend that they could do to make it better for people if they're having to manage people through a redundancy?
I think one of the things is understanding the process, understanding the legalities, and being comfortable with that. Absolutely, that's we all need to be able to do that. But remembering that there's an individual whose livelihood is going to be impacted in the next 30, 90 days, whatever it might be, and being able to really connect with that person, I think is really important. So it's not just about the process, it's about the person as well, and also having the opportunity. Particularly, some consultation meetings will just be with one person, it'll just be the line manager. Some will be, done with the HR and somebody from the management team. But having the opportunity to sort of decompress as well and to look after yourself, because I've been in situations where I've been doing these meetings all day long, and they can become quite draining. Because you are wanting to give so much of yourself and to make sure that you're really focused for that individual. So making sure that in order to do your best, you're at your best, if you like, and not putting on too much pressure. And if they're scheduling meetings every 20 minutes and there's no breaks or anything like that, making sure that you can just, maybe the whole thing might take 2 days instead of 1.5, and just being kind to yourself as well, I think, when you're in those situations. To be
the best person you can be, because you are going to pick up that sort of emotion. It just struck me, of course, then as well, because some people, as you say, are actually going straight through the change curve, great looking, brilliant opportunities, I've already got a plan of what I might do. But there are others who will really want to almost grieve and be really, really, even though it might end up being the best thing in the end, they could be very upset in the moment and very scared. And I'm just thinking at the moment although there is the sort of lots of jobs, lots of companies are trying to employ the right people, there's also lots of costs, aren't there? So people, in high inflation, lots of things that people be fearful about in terms of their livelihood. So that's quite a tricky one. So people could be, extra, and you could see that fear. If people are fearful and things like that, you're having to absorb that. So you do need to be able to let go of it, almost like a counsellor, let alone a coach, where you've got to kind of let go of that emotion.
Yeah, and also I think allowing that emotion to come out and being prepared for that emotion. And as a coach, I'm comfortable with emotion, and I was always comfortable with it sort of as a HR career, but some people aren't.
Yes.
And I think particularly maybe with line managers is preparing them that this could be, and we don't know what extremes of emotion, as you're saying, in terms of how they're going to react, but just letting that person let that out and giving them that space and just listening and being quiet and not trying to kind of make it all better or interrupt, and just giving them their time really to say how they're feeling.
Do you find that you're just working with the people who are at risk and potentially being made redundant, or do you work with other people? Because it obviously can impact those who remain in the organisation as well, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, typically it will be those people who are leaving. So the work that I do will be either on an individual basis or group workshops or a blended approach. But we also find ourselves supporting those people who remain in the organization, and sometimes those people can kind of be overlooked. And some of the themes that come out when you're supporting the survivors, which is a bit of a extreme term, but essentially, yeah, they are the ones who are left, is that because they were impacted by the restructure, they weren't included in the communications and therefore didn't really know what was kind of going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of a sudden the person they've sat next to for the last 10 years has left. And, you know, there's kind of this communication void, really. And I see that a lot. And also there's sort of the guilty feelings of, well, why was it Joe and not me? Yeah. And also sometimes, you know, there's fear that it could happen again. Well, yeah. You know, it happened. What about the next time? And also I've come across a little bit of imposter syndrome as well sometimes, as to, well, they thought that I was better than, you know, Joe who sits next to me, and now I've kind of got to prove that. So there's a whole lot that goes on for those survivors, if you like. So yeah, we do support them as well with sort of, and that's more on an ongoing sort of coaching basis.
That makes sense. I mean, that's a really valid point, isn't it, about the whole communication pieces? People just think, because also, again, you've been in the HR role, where there's only you've got to be on message and not tell people certain things at certain times. It's quite easy, therefore, not to explain maybe the why to those who are you know, the survivors, and then they're sort of asking questions, and that can actually, the stuff that people make up in their heads in the void, you know, it's me next, or another tranche, you know, the rumour mill can do. It's actually remembering to communicate. And I suppose that's maybe an internal HR person. So the people you might work with, you know, if they remember to make sure that at the right time, it's communicated as to why those roles went and why that was the right decision. And you know, if there isn't any plans for others to be affected, make sure they say that, and be alert to that sort of that thinking.
Yeah, definitely. And also that kind of involvement and that inclusive approach can help with those who remain in terms of retention and engagement and motivation of those who are left, because the redundancy program inevitably impacts motivation. And I've been in them myself on the other side of the table, where we've been in a restructure. And of course, as you say, with no information, people make things up and productivity tends to dip because everyone's just chatting about it. Yeah. And I can understand all of that. And I've been that person. I've been on the other side of the table doing that. And so when you're thinking about those who remain, one of the benefits, if you've treated those who left with respect and dignity and offered them outplacement support, then they have a more positive view of you as an employer, because despite the fact that Joe has left, I know that my employer did the best for him, and that, you know, he's going to be looked after and he's got some support, you know, and then it impacts on, well, do I want to stay?
Yeah, it impacts employee engagement as well, doesn't it? Because if they, you know, if they can see that their person who sat next to them has actually had a good experience and is going on somewhere else, then they can be quite comfortable with it. Hopefully not peed off because they wish it was them, you know. That's can happen. So going on to maybe practicalities of because I think, again, outplacement, are we really talking about sort of CV support, a bit of career coaching? What is it? If someone in HR was maybe thinking about what are they buying, or what could they do that would be akin to outplacement, how would you explain it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a blend, and you can go from the basics of updating the CV writing, which is essentially the passport to any job, even if it requires an application form. The information on your CV is what you need in order to sort of move forward. So we work with some clients that just want CV writing for individuals. And if you don't have the budget for outplacement support, then, you know, in-house, maybe using an in-house recruitment team, for example, or, you know, if you've been recruiting recently, you're going to have a view on some good CVs and what good looks like, that kind of thing. So giving people hints and tips on how they can best put themselves across to prospective employers, the format, that kind of thing. But we do all that for, you know, I work with some fantastic CV writers, so we do all of that kind of for them, as it were. And then there's the whole piece around LinkedIn, for example. For some roles, that's appropriate. For entry-level jobs, and in some sectors that doesn't work. And again, we would put something together that was tailored. Having the LinkedIn profile ticking all the boxes, making sure it's on message, and then how to use LinkedIn to find work as well. And then depending on budget and what people are looking for, then there's the one-to-one coaching, and that can be around career coaching, as you described, helping people just to think about what they want to do next, to explore their skills. Sometimes we use psychometric tools as well. And then sort of taking all of that through to, okay, you've got an interview. How can we get you sort of match fit? How can we get you ready? How can we use that time together for that feedback? A coach approach to interview coaching rather than you need to do it like this. Yes. And hopefully getting people through to that next role. And depending on, again, what their package looks like, hopefully there's a time as well. I did one of these just last week for some first 100 days coaching. So going into that new role, what are some of the things you want to leave behind that maybe you don't want to take with you into the next role? How are you going to take those first 100 days to make that most impactful? What are some of the things you're going to be looking at? So it's kind of an end-to-end. And it varies in terms of what employers are looking for. And sometimes they just want to do that on a group basis. So we kind of do a lot of that on a sort of a one-day session with people.
Oh, you do like a facilitate? Is it almost like a sort of facilitated planning? Yeah. So
we can do that as a sort of a face-to-face or some Zooms that would be over a period of time. So
okay. I can see how that would work. That's kind of it sort of makes your budget go further, I suppose, if you want to. You can still think about it because they can talk to each other about it. You can. A bit like training. There's people going into that. Were you saying the first 100 days coaching? Are you saying that you'd carry on coaching them beyond? Because that would be very generous to an employer. Or is it more about visualizing the next, of the next employer? Is it about visualizing what the next 100 days are like? Yeah, so it's kind of more about visualizing it. But some people find a role quite quickly. Their employer might have said to them, okay, we're going to give you, 6 coaching sessions. You've got a budget of this, or whatever it is. Yeah, you've got a budget. And so if they find a role really quickly, then we can use the balance of that to support them in their new role. So, but it's otherwise it's just a sort of a one session where we just do the planning for them, and then they have something to take away and take into the next role. Okay, cool. Which works well. So I think really what we've covered so far a bit about helping understand what the outplacement support might look like, and I can see the sort of depends on budget. You've got different levels of what people can offer in terms of what it is, whether it's a simple CV writing. And actually, if you've not got any budget at all, have you got recruitment people who could help with that? Because that's really practical. LinkedIn, I hadn't thought about, because of course, that is actually very useful at the moment in terms of those things, but it's the right thing for the right role. Thinking about the impact of redundancy on people emotionally, but not just the people who are affected, the people around them, the other people. So make sure the communication isn't forgotten to those who are surviving. You don't want to have the imposter syndrome or survivor's guilt in terms of that. And then when you're working with the individual, almost helping them to process change. So all the different emotions they might go through, it right through to almost future pacing themselves into their next role, or how they can really make sure that that's the one for them and survive there and survive and thrive. I think there would be the thing. So I can see how that all kind of wraps around nicely. Is there anything else that you think that is worth sharing for our audience, or any sort of top tips that you think people should take away?
So I think if someone is contemplating a restructure and they've never used outplacement before, and they're thinking, okay, this seems like the right thing to do, and I think I've kind of got on my LinkedIn profile, helping HR professionals do the right thing, because you don't have to do it, but it is the right thing to do. I think thinking about what kind of support that you're looking for, and essentially who do you want to manage those lasting impressions of your organization, because whoever you engage, essentially I am responsible for that lasting impression, which is a huge responsibility. So I think it's important when you're sourcing that kind of work to get the right fit as well, and to get that focus on individuals. So I think if you're thinking about doing it, it doesn't have to cost thousands of pounds. There are lots of options out there. There are lots of you can do stuff that's even sort of online, for example. So have a think about what sort of budget you've got, who are the people who are impacted, how would they learn best. So I've worked with some organizations where they've said we just can't do it on Zoom because people don't have access to the technology, they just wouldn't learn in that way. So we've gone and sort of done it face to face, as it were. So I think it's really understanding, if you want to offer this service, how does it fit with the circumstances, and what what is it that you really want these individuals to get from this sort of opportunity. And I guess I would say this because that's my business, but I can't imagine and I have been made redundant myself and had no support. I had nothing. I was just like, well, you work in HR, you must know what to do. Just being out there on your own and having someone who's an accountability partner, someone who's supporting you, someone who's there, that sort of runs through everything that we do. So even if you just have someone come to us and say, can you write their CV for them? That person will connect with them. That person will be there, and that person will be that sort of, by their side, as it were, whilst they're providing that service. So yeah, there's a lot more than just kind of delivering the practical side of things, I think.
Yeah, because actually the practical stuff is kind of often can be done. Do you know what suddenly occurred to me there? And I don't know if this is relevant or not. We'll cut it off the podcast if it's not. What about people who have severance, or sort of come to compromise agreements or that sort of thing? Would you ever support in that circumstance?
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. So some employers, again, will offer it as part of the agreement. And other people who've come to me have said, well, I asked for it. In fact, I had somebody just a couple of months ago actually said, I asked for this, so I've got the budget of X and I'd like to come to you to sort of use it. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be a traditional kind of redundancy situation.
Yeah, because actually those can be more contentious, and they can come about for various reasons that are legitimate on both sides. But actually, I can almost think it's that might be really quite an important position where you could. You could, particularly if it's been a bit contentious, leave that person with a more positive, who's often quite a senior person if they've gone to it, with a more positive opinion of the whole setup than you might have done otherwise. So it might be quite a good investment, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits that's often overlooked of outplacement support, is that maybe not at the time, but in time, people will feel more positive about their ex-employer with this support than without it. And so, I think as you said at the start, it's a small world. People will talk about employees that they've left, people they've even just had an interview with, that you can't get away from it. So in where we are, having that support, and even in a settlement agreement situation, someone's still losing their job. Yeah, they're still without a job. And I'm working with a couple of senior clients at the moment who have never had an interview, because they've worked for 30 years and just been headhunted, and they've never had an interview. Yeah, and so even senior people.
And they probably don't want to admit that they're feeling vulnerable or anything like that. No. So having someone independent who can help with that, I can see that would be really important. And it is a small world. It's also a world where people are very feedback driven. So it's all about TripAdvisor, Glassdoor. It's really important that your strapline, do the right thing. Those are not the reasons to do the right thing, but actually if you do the right thing, then it will feed through in a positive way. But going back about demonstrating your values and what you really are like as an employer, as opposed to what you pretend to be like. So quite an interesting angle. Jude, I think that was very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's good takeaways there. If people want to speak to you more directly or get in touch with you, how could they find you?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm June Hogan on LinkedIn. I do have a website as well, which is wildwoodcoaching.co.uk. And my email address is info@wildwoodcoaching.co.uk.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll obviously, as ever, put all of the details on the website at hruprising.com. So if anyone didn't catch those, then you can access June and link in with her through there. But certainly I can see some really major organisational benefits from this, and individual benefits from taking this really seriously. Thanks for coming on the HR Uprising podcast.
Thanks, Lucinda. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now, you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.